At 5:30 in the morning, a Toyota Camry turned onto an empty road in Ohio. Seconds later, the driver slammed the gas pedal to the floor, hit nearly 100 miles an hour, and drove straight into a brick wall. 2 young men died instantly. The teenage girl behind the wheel survived. But what shocked people even more than the crash was what happened after. Was this a tragic accident, or was it murder?
This is the worst crash I've ever seen.
3 occupants, 17-year-old female still breathing.
Both Davion and Dominic are deceased.
Oh, God!
She would never, ever, ever murder the love of her life.
The families of Dom and Davion, I'm so deeply sorry.
When police arrived at the scene in Strongsville, Ohio, they could barely understand what they were looking at. The car was destroyed beyond recognition. The impact had ripped through metal like paper. Officers believed nobody inside could have survived. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanigan were pronounced dead at the scene. But then firefighters discovered movement inside the wreckage. 17-year-old Mackenzie Shirilla was still alive. At first, investigators treated the crash like a horrible accident. 3 teenagers had been out late. There were rumors of drugs, arguments, and emotional tension. But as detectives started reconstructing the final moments before impact, the case took a terrifying turn. Data recovered from the Toyota Camry showed something chilling. 5 seconds before the crash, the accelerator was pressed all the way down. There was no braking, no attempt to steer away. No sign of panic, just full acceleration directly into a building. That single detail changed everything. Prosecutors began looking deeper into Mackenzie's relationship with Dominic Russo. Friends described the relationship as toxic, emotional, and unstable. The two had reportedly broken up and gotten back together multiple times. Arguments were common. Jealousy was constant. According to testimony later presented in court, Mackenzie had previously threatened to crash a car during fights. At the time, nobody took those comments seriously. After the crash, those words came back like a warning nobody listened to. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras showed the Camry moments before impact. In one clip, the car calmly makes a right turn with the blinker on. Nothing unusual, nothing reckless. But less than a minute later, another camera captured the car racing down the industrial road at terrifying speed. Then came the sound of the impact. Investigators said the contrast between those 2 clips became one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the entire case. Something had changed inside that car. The prosecution believed they knew exactly what it was. Their theory was simple and horrifying. Mackenzie Shirilla intentionally crashed the car to kill Dominic Russo and herself after an argument spiraled out of control. Davion Flanigan, Dominic's friend, became the 3rd victim trapped in the back seat. Prosecutors argued that Mackenzie chose the route, chose the target, and chose the exact moment to accelerate. They believed the crash was planned. The defense fought back hard against that claim. Mackenzie's attorneys argued there was no proof of intent. They claimed she suffered from a medical condition that caused her to black out behind the wheel. According to the defense, she had no memory of the crash and never intended to hurt anyone. Her family insisted she loved Dominic deeply and would never kill him on purpose. But prosecutors attacked that explanation immediately. During the trial, they pointed out that Mackenzie had renewed her driver's license and denied having any medical condition that could affect her driving. Doctors and investigators found no evidence of a seizure or blackout before the crash. And then there was the physical evidence inside the car itself. Experts testified that someone who had lost consciousness would not have been able to keep the accelerator fully pressed for 5 straight seconds while controlling the direction of the vehicle. The black box data became impossible to ignore. The car reached almost 100 miles an hour before impact. There was no braking whatsoever. Investigators also discovered evidence suggesting the gear shift may have been manipulated seconds before the collision, leading prosecutors to believe the passengers may have realized what was happening and desperately tried to stop the car. That possibility made the final seconds even more horrifying to imagine. As the investigation continued, Mackenzie's behavior after the crash became a massive source of public outrage. Just months after Dominic and Davion died, videos of Mackenzie on TikTok began spreading online. In some clips, she appeared smiling, trying on Halloween costumes, posing with friends, and acting like a normal teenager. One old video where she joked about being able to do a lot of drugs and not die exploded across social media. To many people watching from the outside, it looked like she felt no remorse at all. Public opinion turned vicious almost overnight. Online, people began calling her "hell on wheels," a phrase later repeated by the judge during sentencing. Others argued social media had poisoned the entire case before trial even started. Supporters of Mackenzie claimed the internet had already decided she was guilty long before any evidence was presented in court. Critics believed her own behavior created that perception. Then came one of the most surprising decisions in the case. Instead of having a jury trial, Mackenzie chose a bench trial, meaning the verdict would be decided entirely by one judge. Legal analysts questioned the strategy immediately. A jury can sometimes be unpredictable, emotional, or divided, but in a case filled with viral outrage, handing the decision to a single judge carried enormous risk, especially when the prosecution's evidence depended heavily on technical crash analysis and intent. The judge overseeing the trial was Nancy Russo, and as testimony unfolded, it became increasingly clear she viewed the crash as far more than reckless driving. During closing arguments, prosecutors focused on one central point. This was not a teenager losing control of a vehicle. This was a driver making a deliberate choice. They argued the combination of speed, acceleration, lack of braking, and prior threats painted a clear picture of murder. The defense tried to create reasonable doubt. They emphasized Mackenzie's age. They reminded the court she nearly died herself. They argued no one truly knew what happened during those final moments inside the car. Without a confession, how could prosecutors prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt? But the judge ultimately sided with the prosecution. In August 2023, Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty of murder in the deaths of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanigan. Judge Russo delivered a devastating statement during the verdict. She said Mackenzie had transformed from a responsible driver into literal hell on wheels. According to the judge, the evidence clearly showed purpose and intent.
This trial is a culmination of decisions made by one person. She morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels. Her actions were controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. This was not reckless driving. This was murder. The court, having had count one tried to it pursuant to waiver, finds the defendant, Mackenzie Shirilla, guilty of murder, to wit Dominic Russo.
The courtroom reaction was immediate. Some cried. Others sat frozen in silence. For Dominic and Davion's families, the conviction brought validation, but not closure. Nothing could bring their sons back. Then came sentencing. When Mackenzie addressed the court, many expected a powerful emotional statement. Instead, her comments were brief. She apologized to the victims' families, insisted she never meant for this to happen, and said Dominic had been her soulmate. She claimed she wished she could remember what happened that morning. For some people, the apology felt sincere. For others, it felt incomplete. Even commentators following the case closely argued that her statement failed to fully acknowledge responsibility. In a case built around intent, that distinction mattered enormously. Then Mackenzie's mother addressed the court. Her emotional speech quickly became one of the most controversial moments of the sentencing hearing. She insisted the crash had been a tragic accident and described how devastated Mackenzie had been after Dominic's death. According to her mother, Mackenzie spent months crying in bed, listening to Dominic's music, wearing his clothes, and surrounding herself with reminders of him. She also defended the Halloween videos that sparked so much backlash online. She claimed Mackenzie's friends encouraged her to go out because she had been emotionally destroyed since the crash. Her mother said the public misunderstood what those videos represented, but the judge was clearly frustrated. At one point, Judge Russo interrupted and said she was hearing far more about Mackenzie's suffering than about the 2 young men who died. The exchange became tense. Mackenzie's mother continued insisting her daughter was not a murderer. The judge disagreed directly in open court. Then the victim's family spoke. Davion Flanigan's family described the pain of losing a son, a brother, and a protector. His sister said she felt permanently lost without him. Dominic Russo's mother told the courtroom that social media and public attention meant nothing compared to the reality of losing a child forever. She said Mackenzie had choices that night. Dominic and Davion did not. The statement shattered the courtroom. Even years later, those victim impact speeches remained some of the hardest parts of the case to watch. Finally, Judge Russo delivered the sentence. Mackenzie Shirilla received 2 concurrent sentences of 15 years to life in prison. She would become eligible for parole after 15 years. The judge acknowledged that many people wanted the harshest punishment possible, but she believed parole eligibility did not guarantee freedom. In her words, Mackenzie would likely spend far longer behind bars. The judge also rejected the defense argument about a medical episode once and for all. She stated clearly there was no evidence of any condition that caused the crash. According to the court, this was an intentional act. Since the conviction, debate around the case has only grown louder. Some people believe the evidence overwhelmingly proves murder. Others argue the prosecution stretched the definition of murder too far and turned a reckless teenage decision into a calculated homicide case because of public outrage. The release of Netflix's documentary The Crash reignited the controversy in 2026. Millions of viewers revisited the case, arguing online about whether justice was truly served. The documentary explored Mackenzie's life in prison, the emotional fallout for the victims' families, and the lingering question that still divides people today. Did Mackenzie Shirilla intentionally kill 2 people? Or did one catastrophic decision become something even bigger once social media took over the narrative? What makes the case so disturbing is that every piece of evidence seems to point in 2 directions at once. On one hand, the forensic evidence looks devastating. A fully depressed gas pedal, no braking, a direct path into a wall. On the other hand, there is still no confession, no recorded argument from inside the car, and no way to truly know what happened in those final seconds. But for the court, the evidence was enough. Judge Russo believed Mackenzie made a conscious decision to turn a car into a weapon. The victims' families believed it too. And because of that conclusion, a teenager who survived a crash that should have killed everyone inside is now spending the most important years of her life behind prison walls. Meanwhile, Dominic Russo and Davion Flanigan never got the chance to grow older at all. That is the part of the story that never changes. 2 families still wake up every morning knowing their sons are gone forever. No verdict can fix that. No documentary can soften it. No argument online can erase it. And maybe that is why this case continues haunting people years later. Because underneath the headlines, the TikTok outrage, the courtroom drama, and the Netflix debates, there is one terrifying reality nobody can escape. 3 young people got into a car that morning. Only one came back alive. The case also forced a larger conversation about true crime in the social media era. Before the trial even began, millions of people had already watched clips, shared opinions, and decided exactly who Mackenzie Shirilla was. Every facial expression became evidence in the court of public opinion. Every TikTok video became part of the prosecution in the minds of viewers online. People were not only debating the crash anymore, they were debating her personality, her appearance, her behavior, and even the way her family defended her. That kind of attention changes a case forever. Some legal experts argued that the public response blurred the line between evidence and emotion. They questioned whether Mackenzie's online image unfairly influenced how people interpreted the facts. Others believed her behavior after the crash revealed exactly who she was. To them, the smiling videos, the selfies, and the apparent return to normal life showed a shocking lack of remorse. But another disturbing question still lingers beneath everything else. Why did she survive? The crash was so violent that first responders initially thought nobody could possibly still be alive inside the wreckage. Yet Mackenzie survived while Dominic and Davion died instantly. That fact alone fueled endless theories online. Some believed it proved the crash was intentional because the driver's side took less direct impact. Others argued survival in crashes can sometimes come down to random physics and pure luck. Even investigators could not fully explain it. Inside prison, Mackenzie has continued maintaining that she never intended to kill anyone. According to reports surrounding the Netflix documentary, she says she thinks about Dominic and Davion every day. She reportedly struggles with the reality that she survived while they did not. But critics remain skeptical, pointing back to the evidence presented at trial and the judge's conclusion that the crash was planned. For now, the legal battle is mostly over. Appeals challenging the conviction have failed, and Mackenzie remains incarcerated in Ohio. Her first chance at parole is expected in 2037, when she will still be a relatively young woman. Whether she is ever released may ultimately depend on whether parole officials believe she has truly accepted responsibility for what happened. And that brings the story back to the question that has followed this case from the beginning. Where does recklessness end and murder begin? At what point does a deadly emotional decision become intentional homicide? For prosecutors, the answer was hidden inside 5 seconds of black box. For the defense, those 5 seconds could never fully explain the chaos inside that car. And for everyone watching from the outside, the case became a warning about rage, obsession, and the terrifying consequences of one irreversible moment. No matter which side people believe, one fact cannot be disputed. 3 families were destroyed that morning. Dominic Russo's future disappeared in an instant. Davion Flanigan's family lost the person they described as their protector and safest place. And Mackenzie Shirilla, whether viewed as a killer or a reckless teenager, became permanently tied to one of the most controversial true crime cases in recent memory. Years from now, people will probably still argue about the intent, the evidence, and the sentence. But the surveillance footage, the black box data, and the screams of grieving parents inside that courtroom will remain impossible to forget, because unlike internet debates, those consequences are real, and they will last forever. The crash lasted only seconds. The arguments about it may continue for decades. But for the families left behind, time stopped the moment that Camry hit the wall.